And we're good on YouTube and everything?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. Today is March 11th, 2024. The time is 7:03 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards.
Here.
Trustee Cranker.
Here.
Trustee Harper.
Here.
Trustee Birma.
Here.
Trustee Joy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Here.
Mayor Fleming.
Here. Do you have any staff or board revisions to this evening's agenda?
Staff has no revisions.
Great. Any board revisions? Great. So we'll now open up for public comment. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and please introduce yourself at the beginning of the comment. We will start with in-person comment and then move to Zoom comment. If you're on Zoom, please go ahead and click the raise hand button so we have you in the queue if you would like to make a comment. Do we have any in-person comments this evening? Jerry.
Jerry Chambers, I'm here representing the fire department. I think you all got an email or something sent to you that was sent by chief. Couple revisions to that after I did a little more research. But just wanted it noted that we do have concerns with the road width. The same concerns were with the Roberts Road, that super narrow. And, the rest of the town, we have pretty wide streets, but on a big snow day, you're choked down to almost a single lane in places. So we have concerns. We're not talking about a single house up there. If they develop that block, this time next year, we may have 5, 6 new houses on that street, which is what I hope. I'm all for development, but we do have concerns with the width. He did have in there about the fire hydrants. I went back and reviewed the Roberts Road, and there is a proposed hydrant at the top of 8th and Bluff. So that is not a concern. That meets our 300-foot requirements. The only other thing that he had stated, he was concerned if we had done a hydraulic study on that to ensure we have the proper flow and pressure, at that elevation on those hydrants. And that's kind of really, that's our concerns on it. Just want it noted. And thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Hey, Jim Weller, 1034 Bluff Street, builder in town. Moratorium issues. I'm really confused on what we are protecting and why we are so adamant about this moratorium. I've seen no maps of these areas. And so why would we stop building on everything? The discussion is very unclear on what the final goal is. The idea that every property in town is subjected to this ordinance is currently proposed, points to the subject really being about stopping development while we figure this out. And what we're figuring out exactly, I have no idea. Save wet areas, stop development. Why and for what? Do we not want a thriving community? Is this really for the better of the community or just for a select few? I really don't know. It's pretty unclear. We are all referencing our new master plan, which is all about density and more housing. The new plan mentions housing over 200 times and how important that is. I only see wetlands mentioned maybe 5 times. Even at our candidates night, every potential future board member stressed how important housing is here in our town. And, why are we stopping more housing if that's what everyone wants? The town has been platted. It's really small. We need to densify it. We need to use all of our available space in the platted land for our future. And this isn't just for the next 2 or 5. We're talking in 50 years. What do we want to see? Parks all through town, or a community of all types of people, not just the well-off that can afford the limited space that will be available and or the regs to develop the harder areas. Because that's what well-off people can do in other towns. There's all the regs. They can just jump through the hoops and make it happen. $10 million to pump out a wetland is nothing. We are surrounded by millions of acres of pristine land. This is what needs our protection. We need to think about how we can double our population, not decrease it. We need to build a community and not crush it. I've waited we've all waited longer than this, but I've waited for 20 years for this town to grow. And now what? We finally have a building industry where jobs, new homes, new residents, adding more fees and regs. Why don't we just do what the Army Corps says and go with what they have to say? I've run out of time. Thank you. And appreciate it.
Your timer was.
Zoning, resident, majority of my life, 524 Reese Street. I'm a plumbing contractor and I want to sort of daisy chain with Jim Weller's comments on this moratorium. I was on the planning commission for 8 years and I always thought the planning commission was the group of people that dealt with problematic issues for this board. This board, as well as the county commissioners, I think the few waterland issues, whether it be wetlands or even a drainage canal going through a piece of private property, as few of these issues that come up, I think the planning commission can deal with those one at a time. To me, it seems like it's a classic government one size fits all strategy, which I'm so crap tired of it because that's how the federal government works. If you do a moratorium on building, you could be, I'm shooting at a dartboard in a black room. You could be knocking 25 jobs out. Now that may seem piddly to you, but that's 25 families. And the size of Silverton, 650 people. If you're not working in a restaurant, guess what? You're working in the construction trade if you're trying to make a decent living in this town. Again, you guys need to think about your planning commission or that, it's just let those people deal with each issue, each individual issue instead of just going for all out ban. It's just nonsense. It's sort of like, here's another analogy. Let's just say you got some kind of a food virus, in the restaurant business. Are you going to close every restaurant in town when you got 300 people a day coming up on the train? So everybody's going to go to the grocery store and eat crackers because there's one or two restaurants had somebody's not washing their hands after going to the bathroom. This one size fits all strategy sucks. And I think the majority of people will agree with that. You guys need to rethink these strategies, please.
Thank you. Any other in-person comment? Okay, let's go to Zoom. Logan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. Logan Austin, speaking on behalf of Durango Area Association of Realtors and myself, being a longtime fan and advocate of Silverton. I think a lot of what's said so far and speaking towards the wetland moratorium contemplation, I would wholeheartedly agree that a vast blanketed approach and prohibiting development and reasonable growth of the community of Silverton is not the right approach. I've been pretty heavily involved in listening to these conversations over the past year. And a lot of those conversations centered around the Board of Trustees wanting to source and gather more information so that there can be more informed decisions on how to manage the town of Silverton and the surrounding areas. It seems now that the processes that were put into place and some of the parties that were hired to help facilitate the gathering information has not occurred. And now we have circumvented back to basically square one and just taking a bit of an overreach, in my opinion, in creating a moratorium on building. As it's been noted by some of the other commenters, putting a blanket approach on this is very detrimental to a lot of factors to Silverton, including the cost of housing. As it's noted in the Compass Master Plan many, many times, that density is needed to offset the increasing cost of housing. Putting moratoriums in place is only going to further cause detrimental factors in people being able to attain housing so that they can support businesses or themselves grow businesses in the town of Silverton. I would highly recommend that the Board of Trustees considers a much different approach to a moratorium and go back to federal guidelines that have been put into place over many decades. Areas of town that have been in question that originated from applications for the Roberts Road is in an area that has been reviewed many times over by various agencies and determined not to be jurisdictional and thus have the potential to be developed. A lot of the areas that Silverton has for growth along Shrine Hill would then be further encumbered in the future, which again will only continue to restrict housing potential and the ability for people to thrive and raise families in the beautiful community that Silverton is. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other public comment at this time, so we'll close this public comment period. We will have another public comment period at the end of the meeting. And we will move to our first substantive agenda item, which is item 4A, new business development deviation review with Jeff Diner.
Good evening,
Good evening.
John Seitz here. I don't think Jeff is going to speak. But what's going on is Jeff is interested in developing some property up on the hill, and not unlike Rick Roberts, has some terrain constraints up there. It's not quite as prohibitive. His original design width was 30 feet. I asked him to widen it. With respect to street widths in general, there are many towns or many streets in town that are 30, 40, and 50 feet wide. We have some examples here. These were actually provided by the developer about a week ago. I didn't think that we would need to present them because I thought we could get it done verbally, but this is illustrative of what these look like. So here's going up 10th Street. And what I'm talking about here is the developed width of the street. The right of way would still be owned by the town of Silverton, and essentially it would be used for snow storage and green space. We have some others. This one is at the wide spot in Bluff Street up there, above Weller's. That's about 32 feet. Can keep going. This is Green Street, which has exceptionally large sidewalks. I think his line is a little short there. It's probably actually closer to 70 feet, but that's Green Street. 70 feet of road width. Then up on Keystone, a little under 25 feet wide up there. That one is 40 feet, but as you can see, there's still a bit of parking developed there, which I would assume that that's going to happen on this street as well, is that the entire right of way will probably be either used or revert to a green space. So another point about the widths, they require less gravel to maintain. They require less labor, less fuel. So with respect to the widths, I think that 40-foot wide street is acceptable. It always has been acceptable from an access and maintenance perspective. With respect to flow and pressure calculations, those can probably be provided. They were done with the design review. But this deviation request doesn't have anything to do with flow and pressure data. So it's a separate thing that we would be discussing there. And, but one point that I would like to also make is that, we probably just need to be communicating with the fire department a little bit better as the town, as we start to develop in areas that we're not accustomed to. You know, it's not flat. There might be some constraints. I still stand behind a 40-foot width recommendation, but it's up to the board to interpret whether that's in the spirit of the town code. Any questions?
Hey, John, this is Dana. Thanks for that clarification. It does seem to me, as you've shown, that there are a variety of widths that we have. I guess my question as we move forward, it seems like we're kind of talking about this in a variance framework. But as we start to think of development happening in places where it hasn't previously, is there any conversation about if or how we want to revisit our development standards or provide a framework to accommodate a variety of options that make sense in a variety of areas so that it's not unclear to the landowner, the staff, the developer, and, you know, town entities that are legitimately involved in these processes?
Yes, and that's a good question. This came up in our land use code rewrite meeting today with the planners. And Gloria and I had also spoken about this before we even started the process. But we feel that the development standard rewrite, which is long overdue, should take place after the land use code work is done. And we would like to prioritize that within the next, you know, as soon as the land use code's done, within a year after that, we would like to get the development standards redone. And I think that this is a good candidate to be included in that.
Great, thanks for that clarification.
You bet.
So to provide a little bit of framework, if anybody finds it helpful, my understanding is the way that this works is when an applicant proposes something, if it's within the development standards, it's an administrative review. And the only reason it's coming in front of us is because there's a deviation from the development standards. And then unless, like here where we have kind of conflicting information from experts that the town relies on, it's a tough call for us, like exactly how we resolve it. But in general, we would rely on staff to make the recommendation to say, you know, we think this deviation is good or bad. In this case, the only question I have is, can we have some more details around the constraints that limit the width of the street to 40 feet? Is it grade? Is it the like beds or like what's going on that's keeping it from being wider?
It's really just cut and fill on the hillside. So when you start to install streets up there, and it's not very steep, but you start to end up with a big cut and fill, or you might end up with a stepped street like is currently on Bluff or Snowden on the side of the hill. And I think I'd rather have a single 40-foot width because those streets are very difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
Because they're so narrow. Where you have, you know, on Snowden there, catty corner from the school, you've got essentially 3 rights of way paths.
Yeah.
Very difficult to maintain. So we want to avoid that. So if you end up going much wider, you end up with this big cut and a steep slope on the hillside above. It's going to create problems for people to develop on the uphill side, getting a driveway in, things of that nature. So what we're trying to do is split the difference and make a sensible decision about the design here, rather than overcomplicate it or make it essentially impossible to build up there.
Thank you. Can I ask Jay a question? Is the board okay with that? Do you have any suggestions on how to address your concerns given the context that you now have?
I'm not an expert in that field. John knows that much better than I do. But, you know, just knowing how the rest of town is, if you get heavy snow, it's hard to get around with wider streets. And I didn't know that there are streets in town that are that narrow. But, you know, using like the 10th Street example, people don't park on the side of the street there. You know, if you've got 5 or 6 houses up there, people are parking on the side of the street, that road's going to get really narrow really fast. I don't know what the answer is though, how to overcome the steepness.
John, is there the possibility that in the future, if more houses are built, that we could revisit the width or the width of that road, or once this is approved, it's pretty set?
Well, we could widen it. Right now, it's positioned directly in the middle of the right of way, that 40 foot. So if we wanted to widen the street, if we felt the need to, then you could widen it on both sides.
Right, because we're preserving that right of way. So a question I had is sort of like, I can look at the plans, I can visualize it, but until we start cutting these streets, it's a little hard to have a perspective of what this looks like and kind of the implications for future travel through that area. And so if we were to approve this section now, but decided, or a future board decided later on, no, we really need it to be wider. If we approve this section of bluff being this width, and then there was a next block of bluff contiguous with it, could we ask for that to be put in wider? Or is that gonna really mess up future infrastructure, erosion, water flow, et cetera?
You would probably have to blend them. But
Yeah.
my understanding was, I originally asked for the street to be 70 feet wide, which is quite wide by town standards. And the engineer replied that that would be costly and unsightly. You would have, as I said, a lot of cut and fill. So you'd have to cut into the hillside above, and you'd have to fill into the hillside below. And then that makes it a lot more difficult for people to access their homes, things of that nature. So, and I guess where I'm coming from here is that I see it on so many other streets in town, and it works. And there is the point that you get so much snow that it's hard to get around. But when we have a really big year, it's hard to get around anyway. I mean, we could be out there plowing and moving snow. We would essentially have to redouble our efforts and our resources to move that much snow in order for there to be really wide streets all the time. But if your emergency vehicles can get around still, it makes sense that we can do it. I mean, this is Silverton. We have snow. Sometimes we have a lot of snow, and the streets are going to get congested no matter how wide they are.
Thank you. Tyler, Sally? Any questions or comments?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Any questions or comments for anyone who hasn't spoken yet?
I do. The proposal is 40. You originally wanted 70. Why don't we do something in the middle?
Well, their original proposal was 30. And then and he said he got back to me with this set of photographs. And I was like, wow, I didn't really realize how narrow our streets really were. I never really went out there and measured them. And then now that I see that the street in front of my house is 60 feet wide, and it always feels very wide. You look at some of these others that are 40, we don't have problems there. If they became fully congested, like around the post office or some of the blocks on Reese Street, you may have a little more congestion at 40 feet, but we'll still be pushing the snow off into those areas away from the street, that are still in the right of way. We'll be storing the snow off of that 40 feet and trying to keep that 40 feet fully wide.
Right, the right of way is still 70 or still.
The right of way there is 100.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the idea of attempting to compromise. My view is that an engineer looked at this.
My thought was 50.
Right, but my thought is that an engineer looked at this, proposed it. John reviewed this carefully before presenting it to us. He was happy with the width. I think if we ask for wider, not only are we increasing the cost for this person to build their home, but we're also undermining the suggestion made by staff. And I would support this as proposed.
Well, I could support asking for 50 and seeing what kind of changes that would make. I mean, really, this is a healthy discussion because it's a recommendation by me, but I'm open to compromise as well. I mean, if we could get it wider, great. what is that extra 10 feet gonna do to the design cost? What is it gonna make a big cut on the hillside, a much larger cut that will be less aesthetic, if you will? It's gonna look more like the Shrine Road. I don't know. So that's really, the heavy lifting is being done by you now.
So in that case, I would revise my statement to say 40 or greater as determined by John, but I think like all that I know sitting here is that wider is better for safety and snow and parking. But other than that, it's pretty arbitrary how to settle on a number. And so if John was happy with 40, I'd say 40 or greater and see what happens. But I don't know that I have enough expertise to suggest anything more specific than that. But I'm one member of the board. So if the board thinks otherwise, please.
My only thought in asking the question was considering all the opinions and all the parties involved, knowing the future growth that will most definitely happen up there. Doing it now and cutting that extra 10 feet an hour, that's a compromise. It's not 30, it's not 70, you meet in the middle. Doing that now would leave a lot of the stress later on down the road, looking back and saying, woulda, coulda, shoulda. That is my only thought with regards to asking the question that I asked. But if you feel 40 is the right number, the magic number, then by all means, let's go with 40. But I do believe that having it wider and having the availability now to do that, and then looking towards the future would probably be the better choice, but I'll do what everyone else wants. Smarter minds.
I think with what's presented here, John, and your recommendation, I think that was some good clarification and just thinking about all the different places I've been in town. You mentioned Keystone, where we are, it's 25 feet. You know, if there's a lot of snow and someone's parking there, it feels narrow, but it's very doable. And so I'm thinking, I just think we have before us an option for infrastructure to be extended, and that feels beneficial to me for some of our purposes in the master plan. And so kind of considering what you've said, John, and hearing from some of our other partners here, I think I'm comfortable with what's presented and not going back again for revisions. That's my opinion.
We can either discuss further or someone wants to make a motion or we can ask more questions.
Fun prime number like 47.
Tell that to the engineer.
Perfect.
Like it.
Not a prime number.
All right, vote on it.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the deviation from the town development standards as presented in Dana's site plan for improvements to Bluff Street from the intersection of 8th Street to the intersection of 9th Street.
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Cranker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Birma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
You bet.
Okay, next agenda item we have is new business item 4B, which is a proposal for a structure around trustee discussions. So when we have complex or challenging issues, I've been thinking about a way to do this for a long time, and this is just a proposal. It's not a statement that we will do this. This is a discussion, and it's up to the board to decide if we'd like to implement this or not, or some variation of it. But after participating and listening in on 4 years of many 4+ hour meetings, it occurred that maybe there's a way that we can structure some of our conversations. I don't think all trustee discussions need to have this type of structure, but I think the mayor and Gloria can identify items in advance that likely would benefit from something like this. So the proposal is everyone would have 3 minutes for an opening statement each, which can be waived but cannot be passed to others. And then we'd go round robin on that. And then everyone would have an additional 2 minutes for rebuttal statements. Again, they could be waived, but can't be added to anyone else's time. Then we'd have an open discussion for 10 minutes, allowing for kind of the brainstorming and negotiation that tends to happen. But I like the idea of putting this cap on it, so that I find that a lot of the times after, 20, 30 minutes of discussion, we are kind of going in a bit of a circle. And then it would end with a minute of closing statements where people try to, make their point and persuade whoever else on the board to agree with them. And then at the end of that, we would have 3 options. Make a motion, defer that item to a work session, or request further information to be gathered by staff. And no other options are available. So if we run out of time, we're still nowhere closer to a resolution, we have to pick work session. But I feel like that gives us a little bit of guidance, and can help us expedite some of these really complicated discussions.
I really like this idea. Who would be like the enforcer of this structure?
The way that we've been running meetings, I think it would have been me to keep the time, or whoever the mayor is next. But it also could be a staff member.
Thank you.
Sure.
No, I was in favor of doing this when we first brought it up like 3 years ago, and still happy to go this route too.
I think it's worth trying. I think it gives some structure. And with a new board coming, it could give a little bit of framework for discussions. And I think it helps for both the board and the public to direct the conversation, direct the dialogue and debate in a more structured manner that can probably get to either decision-making or some form of conclusion, whether that's staff direction, more information, work session, more effectively. Seems like a useful tool.
And it kind of caps the time for a complicated discussion at 52 minutes.
Yeah.
It seems like plenty of time for any item for a single meeting. Tyler and Sally, it sound reasonable to you guys?
Go ahead, Tyler.
I like the idea of, just, you have to be concise in your, opening statements and arguments because you have limited time. It makes sense. I wonder if 1 minute at the end is enough for maybe a closing argument, but I was also just I've been trying to think of some examples of when that's happened. And I guess I can't think of any time that I've seen too many of us go longer than a minute on a closing statement, but it's just that was the only thing I was thinking about, was whether that was enough time. So,
I mean, adding a minute to that to make it 2 minutes total still keeps us under an hour. That'd be 59 minutes total. So I think that's super reasonable if we want to make the closing statement 2 minutes.
I think this is a great legacy to the next board. And it helps with maybe even a little bit of preparation and advanced thinking about issues. And if we can't give the next board a raise, at least we can give them maybe some extra time.
Time is money.
Time is money.
Awesome. So any objection to giving staff direction to draft a resolution on this proposal with the revision of closing statements being 2 minutes each instead of 1 minute each? 1 minute each. Awesome.
I don't have opposition. I think it sounds really straightforward and we have a lot of support for it. It's just how it fits with staff priorities. So if it's ready in a month, that's great. If it's ready in 4 months, I don't have a preference around that. Just honoring the time.
Great, Jim.
I am all for trying new tools and trying new things to figure it out. I am absolutely against stifling free speech. I am absolutely against stifling the thoughts and opinions of the members of this board and future members of this board. I know over the past 4 years that there's been times where a lot of talking has happened, a lot of speaking has gone on. And I think in some of those later moments in those conversations are when we do some of our best thinking and some of our best work. I'm not against trying this, but I would also like to add something that if this doesn't work, and if there is objection by the new board, that we go back to a regular conversation. Putting time limits and stifling thought and conversation, that's against who we are. That's my opinion.
What if we were to put a check-in point as part of the trustee retreat, Gloria? Because that will be after, like, we'd have this to maybe use over a period of time and then maybe have a check-in as part of the trustee retreat. If we've had enough instances where we've used it.
Well, and wouldn't it go to a work session if we ran out of time? So we'd still be able to talk at length for a very long time about it in a work session.
Yeah, I think it's pretty limited thinking to say that something like this stifles free speech.
I understand, and thank you for saying that. But what I am trying to get across is I understand the time limits. I understand, and I'm not saying I'm against this. But what I am saying is I want it on record that I do not believe that in any sort of way we should be cutting off one another from expressing our opinions when we know over the past 4 years that in those later discussions, we end up coming to better solutions. We're more creative. Yes, it goes a little long, but it gives us more time to think. I'm not saying, again, not saying I'm against this. What I am saying is we, each and every one of us, 2 years, 4 years, we have been elected to represent each and every person here in town. And limiting the availability to have conversations, I think, is against the spirit for why we have this governing body in the first place. That's my opinion. I am not against proposing this as long as down the road we can look at this again and say, hey, maybe it's working, maybe it's not. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, I think revisiting this is absolutely necessary. But I do want to kind of make one more stab at opening your mind to thinking about this differently, which is that I think what this forces is for us to be slightly more prepared or for issues to be more developed. And that if we can't resolve an issue in an hour, then it wasn't ready for prime time and that it needs to be workshopped further. And I think a lot of our really long discussion topics, possibly this one too, needed a workshop before being discussed at a regular board meeting. And if we realize that's the case by not being able to resolve an issue within an hour, then that workshop gives us even greater freedom than pushing past 11 o'clock while we're all tired and exhausted trying to come up with, a final answer. So I actually think that this is a tool that gives us much broader discretion and creativity to resolve an issue rather than limiting us.
Like I said, I'm not against trying new things.
Great.
I think if we have a check-in point, and I think this does help us focus our thoughts, our conversations, it kind of has a little bit of accountability for each board member to make sure we're prepared, we've talked to the people we need to, and we're ready for the topic at hand. So what if we have a check-in point?
For sure. And this is up to the discretion of mayor and town administrator to put into place for specific items. And if it's not working, it's not working.
Yeah. Well, overall, I like the idea. I appreciate the discussions that happen here, but I think when it's pushing towards 11 and people are frustrated and tired, it's not quite as fruitful as it could be at a work session earlier in the day.
Or also just to add in the role of committees. And if the next board can use that structure as a way to really think through some of the issues on those complex topics, this protocol acts like an indicator to the board that something needs to go to a work session or that the committee needs to somehow review and discuss something differently ahead of a meeting. So then those jobs in the committee become a little bit more focused maybe and a little bit targeted, knowing that that the subject needs to be ready for for this protocol. Potentially, I don't know. I see it as an experiment, and I think it is an attempt to honor people's time, and I think it's an attempt to honor people who are tuning into our meetings as well, because we've definitely taken I personally am such a talker, and I am so verbal, and I'm a verbal processor. This would be really challenging for me, but I think I would be up for it because I think it would help crystallize ideas.
And Jim, I respect your concerns and I appreciate your willingness to try it anyway.
All right, let's put it to a vote.
Well, it's just a direction. If we don't have an objection, then I think we're good. Any objection? Nope. Great. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is item 5, consent agenda items.
And this consent agenda includes a memorandum of understanding with the Creative District for the funds that were allocated partners line item in the 2024 budget, as well as a letter of support for their upcoming grant applications.
Any questions or concerns on the consent agenda? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Kränker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Birma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is staff reports.
So election update for everybody. We got all of our labels printed today. They will start going out in the mail tomorrow and on Wednesday morning. What else? The election notice will go into the paper this week and will stay in the paper until we make it to the election. We're putting a little blurb out there too for everybody that lives in Danville. Once the annexation is finalized, we're going to give them some instructions on how to come in and get their ballots so that they can vote. Election judges are being selected. It is going well. If you've got any questions?
Awesome. And what's the process for, or what's the expected timeline for people who live in Annville to get registered and then be able to vote?
So it's going to be a little bit of a tight turnaround, but everybody that lives over there, at least based on the list that I'm looking at, are already registered to vote. Once we annex, it will be part of the town, and then they should be able to just come in and pick up the ballots that I will have waiting for them. I also have a voter registration lookup for signature verification and all that fun stuff. So if somebody comes in and I don't already have them on the list, I can look up their name and I can see that they're registered to vote over in Annville, and then I can just give them a ballot.
Awesome.
So it should be, and it will start on March the 29th, Friday morning, from 8 a.m. until we close the polls at 7 p.m. on the 2nd.
And if someone happens to be out of town that lives in Annville during that shorter window, can they pick up their ballot early and leave it with you, even though they won't officially be annexed until later? Or do they have to be physically present during that like 3-day window?
If anybody that lives over there is interested in doing that, then I can set their ballots aside. If for some reason annexation did not work, then I could set them aside and then we wouldn't count them, but I can come up with a process for that. Where if they want to come pick them up early and leave them at town hall, then once annexation is finalized, I can put them in the box.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then Sarah had a for Kendall.
We're having some issues. Have inconsistent performance with the evacuation motor and an intermittent electrical issue. It's basically a game of whack-a-mole right now. We fix one and we're having it come up somewhere else. We're waiting for a courtesy visit from POMA. They're delivering our work here as well, so we can be ahead of getting maintenance done this summer. So I'm just waiting to hear back from them on that. In terms of sales, we're up 15% this year. We're seeing a lot of different kind of groups come in this year. It's been really awesome to connect with what I consider the future of Kendall. Durango, Telluride, Ridgeway, and beyond. Silverton Mountain carryover comes up. I would say the only other update that I have is that while the lift is down, we're doing free rentals for anyone that comes and signs a waiver. Where you can try Nordic skiing. Ice skating rink is down now for the season. It's melted out, but we're also giving downhill skis for per rentals too. So doing that every Saturday and Sunday to try to offset downlift time.
So just to clarify, sales are up 15% from last year, which was a high water.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question. Sarah, I was just wondering for pass holders, if there's a way to, I don't know, offset the decrease in days by like reducing pass prices next year, or it seems like giving refunds for this year is excessive, but I'm just wondering if there's a way we could think of to compensate pass holders who are losing days, who are unlikely to need rentals or that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I've been asked that a lot. What I think we'll do is we'll look at a prorated amount. And look at adding that towards season passes for next year. Or, you know, in worst case scenarios, if they're asking for refunds, you know, look at some kind of partial refund or another option. Talk through those as they go, as they get more heated, I guess.
Okay, yeah, thanks for thinking about that.
Any other questions?
On it. Stressful.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most importantly, thank you for being creative with your approach.
Oh.
It's awesome.
Anything else on staff reports?
Not unless you all have any questions.
Any questions on the staff reports in the packet?
CPS has a really dense one again. Just gonna call that out.
Yeah, I'm not sure for anyone watching if you actually dig into the packets deeply, but I highly recommend perusing the staff reports. They are chock full of information of what staff's working on, what's coming up, and what's been accomplished. And it's really impressive how much this team is accomplishing. Great. The next item on our agenda is committee reports, committee and board reports. And the first one we have is the Community Builders Workshop in Glenwood.
It's my turn. I thought Lucy was going to talk about it.
I can talk about it. So a handful of us went to Glenwood. It was a really great group. We tried to get representatives from staff, from town board, and from the community. So it was Jim and myself from the board. It was Lucy and Anne from town, and Mel Childs, Deanne Gallegos, Sarah Mordecai, and Emily Thorne. And so a variety of perspectives, business representation. Really, the goal of this training was to develop a strategic plan for the housing authority. We were working with our friends at Community Builders, and I walked away. A key takeaway for me was process matters. So the process that Community Builders used in this training and workshop, they were working with us as a Silverton group. They also had about 5 other groups. Some were regional groups and kind of coalitions. Some were counties. I think we were the only like town specific one. And they used a similar, Oh, the maker group. Jim really likes maker group. And they used just a super effective process for moving each group through to their really end result goals. And that was really impressive to me, and just a reminder that process really matters in how we kind of get through community engagement, strategic planning, visioning. And so we worked with JJ Folsom, who was very familiar with us from the master planning process, to really move us through some top priorities around housing, but in particular, the housing authority and how we make that a sustainable entity, funding wise, structure wise, what it's able to accomplish for the community and in partnership with other entities in town. And so it was a really, I felt, effective process. I think staff felt really supported at the end of it. And it was really great to bring this diverse group of people together to kind of have some great team building, and just really coalesce around some common values and priorities. And we all didn't agree on all points, but again, to be reminded that we can work through the things that we really care about and find commonality. And so it was very effective. I thought very useful, very intense, and productive, that we were able to get what we needed at the end. So community builders will be drafting kind of an action plan for us from it, which will have tasks for all of us. And we'll be able to kind of move forward with strategic planning for the housing authority. Anything to add?
Yes.
Fearless co-leader.
Yes. Thank you. We on this board, we only get to see staff in this capacity, in this building, sitting at these chairs or in their offices. What I enjoyed more than anything else was seeing Lucy, was seeing Anne, their approach, the passion, the thought process, and the true understanding of where we are as a community and how blessed we are to have them. They are miles ahead of everybody else. And we don't, not talking to them on a daily basis or seeing that from them here in the building, you don't know. But getting to sit with them days and days and going through these work sessions, and then after the conference is over, and then still having these impassioned conversations, it gave me, and I think the rest of us, a true appreciation for what we have. And the youth and the energy and the spirit that is really going to be the next generation of this town. So I was very, very impressed, extremely impressed. The community connections, they were great, but really it was the team and the individuals, but really where they're coming from and looking forward to the future. I'm excited.
I think we all walked away very energized, very excited. And I think too, what was neat, I don't know, Jim, if you felt this, but I sort of feel like we were the superstars at that meeting. Like we were pretty cool because we'd been on the New York Times, we'd gone through this amazing process. And again, just kind of celebrating the process. I think that's what I took away with it, is like, we have this master plan and you had a variety of folks there that were working through sticky issues, but it just made me walk away with such an appreciation for our community. So for all those people that were at the workshop on our team, but then just thinking of all the different people that we represent and how we have so much potential, energy, and capacity. And that was really exciting to see what's getting built at Town Hall and also what's just kind of being leveraged and motivated in the community. And it was just, we were all riding high, I think, even though we were very tired. It was like 8 to 6. This was a long workshop. We're better than Meeker.
Better than Meeker.
Jim said it. It was great.
It was great, but the team, all of us brought something unique and different to the table. And I think we all walked away gaining so much more, vast amounts of knowledge. So I'd go do it again. It was cool.
So thanks to staff for supporting it, for sending this team, and for the community members that stepped forward to offer their time. It was a big commitment. Any questions on it?
I'm just excited to see what happens next.
It was so fun. Get a chance to go. It was really fun.
No, we will present their plan at the next housing authority meeting,
Thanks.
probably the end of April, it's looking like.
Our next committee board report is the library passport announcement.
So if you can see up there, that was our phrase in Spanish of the week. And the library, get your passports at the library today.
Whoa.
So,
Not renewals. I was with Misty today, just to clarify, you still have to renew on your own.
she will do pictures though.
We'll do pictures.
Yeah,
It's very exciting.
but new, and most renewals are all online anyways, but they do require pictures, so you can get your pictures there.
And it expired a long time ago.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a long time ago. You have to renew.
It's very awesome.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, so you go see
And
them.
then I also include the Region 9 performance report as well as the Region 9 economic snapshot. The snapshot only includes the overview and relevant information for San Juan County. So you'll notice there's some skipped pages there. If you'd like the full document, it's published on their website.
And I just had an aside with that, having gone to a couple Region 9 meetings, is just, I think this document is dense, but is really helpful because it gives us some information kind of about how our county is similar and different. And I just think being reminded of the resources that are out there for Region 9, and San Juan Development Association has done great about plugging those, but they just provide such robust services in this area that our community, whether it's business leaders, whether it's for grant writing, and I know on the town and San Juan development level, we've taken advantage of them a lot. But just encourage people to remember that it is a resource. I did want to call out, I'm just going to leave this stat with everybody because I think it's meaningful for our discussions in the future. In the full Region 9 economic snapshot, they had average teacher salaries. And again, this is just average, but I'm going to use this as an example. They had average teacher salary for Silverton, $43,000 a year, median home price, $560,000 a year. Annual income needed to afford that home, $146,000 a year. So that's all we gotta say on that point. That stood out to me very significantly. So keep that in mind. I know we all face that as we think of essential workers and employees and paramedics, EMTs, volunteers, staff. Big disconnect there.
So you're suggesting the school should pay teachers $146,000 a year?
I'm just saying essential workforce.
Now.
All I'm saying. Thanks for including that, Gloria. It's a good read. Print it off, Jordan. You might want to read it on paper.
I do think teachers should get paid that much or more. Anything else?
Me too. I want to go on record saying that while I can.
Won't disagree.
Next, we have trustee reports. Nothing going on in trustee land this time. Okie dokie. Continued business, 9A, Kendall deck proposal.
Hello again. Okay. We broke this into a couple different phases now because we're way over bid price. I wanted to show the structural damage that we're looking at that's not optional first. Gloria, do you have those photos? Yeah, look at that. The basic way to describe this is when we pulled the deck out, we didn't backfill. And so we've had the beams that have shifted. So now we're having to raise the building up, pull the structure supports out, place new ones in before we can even begin. It's probably one of the worst ones. I think that's beam 2, beam 3. So essential, right?
So the pillar, the beams have shifted or the beams have shifted?
Both.
Both.
Mhm.
Thanks. So that's why this wasn't in the original plan.
Correct.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we can start repair on that as early as April, I've been told. So once that's finished, we'd move into phase 2, which is just putting the slab in, getting it ready for use. And then the third phase would be adding all the bells and whistles plus the extension of the ADA ramp. I've deviated from the original plan just a little bit to provide access to ADA to the parking lot instead of putting the stairs and the ramps in the back. One of the reasons for that is because anyone with an injury or just with a disability would have to go over rocky trails all the way to the back of the slab to be able to access it. And then we would still have the issue of the ramp coming from the parking lot and being disconnected from the backside of the deck. So this plan that's not drawn to scale, we're taking the back two ramps out, moving them into the front side of the building. That would be part of the third phase. Still be access to the back side of the building. Wouldn't be gas lines with fireplaces just yet, but we'd essentially be moving some of the stairs back as well and adding that into the third phase. So I pushed everything that we possibly can that's not operational for the deck into the third phase, which would be in 2025. Questions so far? No? Devin?
Great.
Yep. That's basically it. I mean, we'd be looking at an eyesore next winter for a bit until we're able to, extend the ramp all the way through. I elected to keep the stairs to the rental shop just because we've used the rental shop all day, every day that we've been open. And two, that wasn't in the original bid either. So I decided to keep that in just to cut costs. A few other ways we tried to cut costs were, taking out heating element and the future heating costs of having that heated and opting for manual snow removal. We have two brand new snow blowers that we love to use that are already at Kendall. I'm a snow removal person. I opt for the physical labor. So other than that, that was really the only other way that I could get the bid down. I tried my best, but this is what we're looking at in order to finish it out. I do want to note that we booked over $12,000 in weddings for 2025 this week alone. I think for the future and thinking ahead, we need to look at potentially having some kind of a premium if we finish this out. I think, reasonable to think that we can recover costs over the next several years. Anything else?
Oh, yeah. Did I interrupt someone?
No, it's all you.
Okay, I just want to express very strong support that this project continue. And Sarah, I think this is a great strategy to break it down and make it happen over time. My only concern, and it's not really a concern, but I guess I think just somehow protecting the funds that go towards it so that it doesn't get lost in the reshuffling and reprioritization as, boards change and community changes. It's just such an essential element of that experience at Kendall. And when we look at it on paper, it can look really expensive and like an easy thing to cut. But then when you experience it at Kendall, it's just so clear that it's a really key element over there of that design and amenity for locals and people who come to visit. So I really want to make sure that there's a way to somehow protect its, if we don't get to like pretty landscaping, we can probably survive at Silverton. Like, I don't know if anyone has gorgeous landscaping here, but really making it functional and usable is essential, I think. And yeah, so then as we have time and as it gets at least mitigated, the damage mitigated, potentially looking at some creative funding structures or strategies to put in place that protect the investment over time.
I totally agree with Sally. I think this needs to be accessible, it needs to be functional, and it needs to get finished. Because Kendall, the building, that whole land, it is one of our biggest assets as town. And we look at the list, you look at the Esper Caboose and in the standard, you look at the plaques, like so many people in this community have contributed to that space, that land, that lift. And I think we just need to steward this into the future. And so it's a project to me that just, it has to get done. You know, like you'd open the door and kids fall out the windows. It has to get fixed. And it is an asset, I think, that we can think a little bit differently about it when you're talking about events and just not using it as a complete money-making tool, but just thinking how we can use that asset well. So functional, accessible, and finished. I'm very on board. And I appreciate Sally's comment about making sure that the funds get allocated so it gets carried across the finish line in a functional way. And I appreciate, Sarah, what you've done to find ways to make that happen.
Yes.
And our goal is that it will be functional this summer.
Yeah.
Having the slab poured, making some steps that come down, they're not going to be permanent yet, but making it kind of work for the summer so that we don't have to close off that area.
I think this is a phenomenal investment, and it's been a bear of a project that's been hanging over our heads for a really long time. So I'm excited to see an actionable plan that we can execute. And mostly in jest, but like, would it be cheaper to just hire 9318 contracting to be part of the town staff?
We've talked about it.
If there aren't any other comments, would someone like to make a motion, or are there other comments?
Oh, I can make a motion to approve the phased approach with 9318 contracting with the current budgeted amount of $175,000.
Second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Edwards?
Yes.
Trustee Cranker?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Absolutely.
Trustee Beerma?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. And a quick question for clarification is the phase 3 $115,000 projected budget amount. We weren't recommended to include that in that motion because it's so far out, and that number may change when we have to get it estimated at the end of next year. Okay, great. But it wasn't because we don't end equally to pursue it all the way through.
Right. Basically, you all are approving the phased approach at this point and the first two phases.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
And everyone else that's worked on it with you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 9B, moratorium ordinance update, and I will recuse myself for the reasons that you just stated.
I will also be doing that.
So this agenda item is informational only, unless it elicits staff direction. I wanted to provide clarity around there being 2 ordinances published in the paper this week and an explanation for why there isn't an ordinance in front of you tonight. So per CRS, we need to notice ordinances that amend our land use code 15 days in advance. And per our code, we need to have a recommendation from the Planning Commission on ordinances that affect Chapter 16. So the soonest we can hear the ordinance is March 21st, which I have already scheduled a special meeting for at 6 o'clock on March 21st. At that meeting, the trustees will be presented with 2 ordinances. One is the ordinance that I was directed to write that includes a moratorium on land use applications that meet the town's definition of a wetland. And the other is a moratorium on land use applications that are within the boundaries of the wetland map and does not include depressional wetlands. The second ordinance was discussed at the last meeting, but I didn't have the resources to provide guidance until after the meeting. So the board will be able to choose which ordinance, if any, they would like to pass during the special meeting on the 21st. I'm happy to answer any questions on that process or take direction.
I just want to say thank you for looking into that and going ahead and drafting that second ordinance, because I know that there was some discussion in that meeting about how to use the map, and Not being able to do it in the moment was frustrating, but thank you so much for figuring out how to do it outside the meeting. So really appreciate that.
Okay. So
Everybody can look at the map.
yes,
Exists in the world now.
it's published in the paper now. And then the next time this will be before the planning commission on the 19th, and then it'll go on to the special meeting on the 21st.
Thank you. I appreciate the options.
And the special meeting on the 21st will include a vote of the trustees on both of the ordinances, or which of the, will the trustees have those both? They will have those both available at that time, but then,
They can
I guess-
either choose to approve one and deny the other, or they can deny both, just depending on how it goes.
Thank you.
Yep. And we will need the majority of all the trustees. So even with recusals, we'll still need a majority of 4 trustees to pass an ordinance. If that helps clarify. Oh, I think you're muted, Sally. Never mind. Not us. Okay.
Thank you. Tried out your process approach. It worked great. It was so fast. We're moving on.
I loved it. I loved it. All right.
We had a long training this week, Jim and I. We're feisty, sorry.
So next item on our agenda is item 9C, Alternative Liquor License Authority Hearing Officer RFQ.
And this agenda memo is a little out of order, so you can find it on page 64 of your packet. The board released the RFQ for an alternative hearing officer, license authority hearing officer on February 12th. Proposals were due March 4th. We did not receive any proposals. Staff is requesting that we keep the RFQ open until an application is turned in, and we will bring it to a board meeting for review.
Thank you. There's thumbs up. There's thumbs up.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Wow. That was the last item on our agenda. So now we will have our closing public comment. First in person, then on Zoom. If you're on Zoom and would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button so we can add you to the queue. Do we have any in-person public comment this evening? We do not. I do see a raised hand on Zoom.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's always weird on a cell phone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight, but I appreciate you all and your ongoing discussions. And I would just like to say, I feel like, again, sometimes when something big comes up with the wetlands, a lot of people start paying attention and don't necessarily go in and read the information or the information in the packets or information from past meetings, and would just like to encourage everybody to do that. The moratorium that was discussed is not just a blanket moratorium on all building on anything in Silverton. And I think that that was a few people's understandings, and that is really misrepresenting it. So I would encourage people to look through tonight's packet, because that map is really great and you can actually see where there are wetlands. And yeah, so I just like to encourage people to seek out more information, and just to clarify that it doesn't mean that nobody can build anywhere in town. And I would just like to go back to saying that like as a town, we of course need housing, we need affordable housing, and we also need to protect our finite resources as we're seeing super warm temperatures and lack of snow. And this is going to be something we see again, and lack of water. And so that's going to be something we have to adapt to. And if we don't value our natural resources, that is going to come back and bite us all. So that's all.
Thank you. Would you please introduce yourself for the record? I didn't want to cut you off at the beginning.
Oops, sorry, it's Evan Harris.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I do see another public comment.
This is Melody. Can you hear me?
We can.
Unfortunately, I missed most of the meeting because I got a phone call, but in answer to the last speaker, everybody in town has a right to their own opinion, and they have a right to decide what they want to do, whether or not they read what any individual person wants them to read or be involved in. And I think I've pretty much kept my mouth shut about the wetlands issue, but it's very, very complicated and it's very emotional. And when we get to a decision, I think it's going to be something that the community can live with, but we're all going to have to give a little. And thank you for all that you've done. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment at this time, we'll go ahead and close public comment. The time is 8:19 p.m. and I adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.